Hello and welcome to the Reach for the Sky podcast. Hello everyone and welcome to the show. Now, as this is the first episode, I'll spend a bit of time introducing myself and setting the groundwork for what this podcast is and what it's about. I'm known as Reach for the Sky, which I will shorten to Reach for convenience. I've been playing War Thunder since January 2013, so roughly a year and a half. Unlike many people, I didn't expedite myself from World of Tanks over to War Thunder, although that could have happened, but I did stop playing World of Tanks before joining War Thunder sometime. There was about a 6-month gap at least. But I can say that I'm a real fan of War Thunder. It's probably my most played game at the moment, although I do play other games. But it's the only MMO I play. Everything else is either a retail game that's, first-person shooter or driving game or a strategy game. But War Thunder is the only MMO that I'm currently playing. Used to play World of Tanks, as I said. World of Tanks, but no longer. My other tastes in games include usually first-person shooters. I'm really into Battlefield 4 at the moment. I used to be into Call of Duty. The recent titles haven't really taken my fancy, but World at War and Black Ops 1 particularly are a couple of my favourites. I'm also deeply ensconced in the Metro series. That's 2033 and Last Light. These are single-player only games, but they are excellent and I can thoroughly recommend them. In fact, at the end of this month, when the Redux versions of the games come out, I'm going to be doing a playthrough on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is the same name as my account on here, so Reach for the Sky. About 80-85% of my uploads are War Thunder themed, but I do occasionally dabble in things like Men of War, which is a World War II RTS, and occasionally some other things as well, but mostly it's War Thunder. So that's the brief introduction out of the way. Now the podcast itself, Reach for the Sky, is what I'm also calling the podcast. It's quite a nice name, I thought. It fits the whole War Thunder theme with the planes, and it's memorable, so yeah, Reach for the Sky is what this podcast is going to be known as. I'm mainly going to be talking about War Thunder, information that we receive from the developer's blog, like new content, changes, patch notes, and actual features of the game and content in general. And perhaps occasionally I will be talking about user-created content, like my favourite YouTube uploads from YouTubers. So I could be discussing montages, edits, actual content from members of the community. And I may do a bit of coverage of community-made events. I know most weeks there's a simulated battle event that's set up by players. So that's basically what the podcast is going to be about. Now, occasionally, I will also be dabbling in games outside of the War Thunder circle, just to sort of, to broaden the horizons and prevent the podcast being zoned in on a very specific area of interest. So I may dabble in other games I'm playing in and talk briefly about what's interesting me at the moment. So this is primarily a War Thunder podcast, but from time to time it will be a general gaming podcast. So if you're a gamer and if that sounds appealing to you, then I recommend that you subscribe to this podcast and keep listening. So the theme of the first video I thought would be a bit of historical information. I do historical videos on my channel, the War Thunder Vehicles and their Variants series, I thought I'd do something a little bit different for the podcast, just to interest the listeners, and perhaps if they're interested more in the historical side of things, if you have a passion for War Thunder, you may sometimes want to know more about the events in reality that make up what we're playing today. So the first kind of historical feature is going to be on Ernst Barkmann, who was a German tank ace. Now, unfortunately, he was a member of the SS, but as far as I'm aware, he didn't commit any crimes. So, hopefully, me talking about Ernst Barkmann shouldn't offend anyone. I can understand the connotations of the SS, but in this case, I'm purely focusing on the actions of Ernst Barkmann as a tank commander. So, Ernst Barkmann was born in August 1919 in Kiesdorf, Holstein, in Germany, of course. And he died just 5 years ago, June 2009. He was born into a farming family. His father was a farmer. He attended a local school, and after he was educated, he followed in his father's footsteps and became a farm labourer himself. When Germany began its rearmament in the mid-1930s, Ernst enlisted in the SS as a foot soldier and was assigned to the SS Standarte Germania, which was headquartered in the north of Germany, in Hamburg. Standarte Germania was a regiment, and it was posted to East Prussia in anticipation of hostilities against Poland. When the war broke out on the 1st of September 1939, Barkmann saw action with this formation as part of the invasion of Poland. He served as a machine gunner initially in the 9th Battalion. According to records, he fought well and was promoted to Rottenführer, which is roughly the equivalent of a corporal in British, English, American armed forces, although the ranks aren't completely equivalent. In the German army, Rottenführer, the Wehrmacht equivalent was sort of senior corporal, so sort of like a junior sergeant, a junior NCO, basically. He was awarded the Infantry Assault Badge, and he was wounded and received the Wound Badge, and later, in October of 1939, his battalion was used to form a part of the SS division Wehrversorgungstruppe. In May 1940, Barkmann took part in the invasion of France as a part of this division. In late 1940, the Germania was detached from the division to form a cadre for a new division, the SS Division Germania. This division comprised a large number of European volunteers, so there were large amounts of non-Germans in this particular division. Barkmann served with the division during Operation Barbarossa, but he was seriously wounded in July of 1941. He spent the remainder of the year recovering and again received the Wound Badge, but this time in silver. The first time was black. In early 1942, he was posted as an instructor to a unit in the Netherlands, where he trained European SS volunteers. Shortly after this, in late 1942, he applied for a transfer to a newly formed Waffen-SS Panzer Arm. In the winter of 42, he was sent back to the Eastern Front to join the 2nd Company of the Panzerregiment Das Reich, part of the SS Panzergrenadier Division Das Reich. Upon arrival at the front, Barkmann was posted as a gunner in a Panzerkampfwagen 3 Ausf J. Now, the Ausf J is similar to the Ausf L we currently have. It was the first model of the Panzer III to be armed with the KWK 39 L60, but unlike the Ausf L, it didn't have extra armour plates on the turret front and hull front. So, new gun, but the armour was didn't have any supplication. The Das Reich was attached to Obergruppenführer Paul Hosse's SS Panzer Corps, under the overall command of Generalfeldmarschall Manstein and his Army Group South. This Panzer Corps formed the vanguard of Manstein's efforts to halt the Soviet advance near Kharkov, which became the Third Battle of Kharkov, which was one of the latter successful operations, one of the last German victories on the Eastern Front. Barkmann served with this regiment during a large scale of mobile operations to try and destroy a Russian army group called Popov. And during these battles, Barkmann proved to be an excellent gunner. He was promoted to Unterscharführer, which is basically equivalent to a junior sergeant. And he was given command of his own Panzer III in time to take part in the approaching Third Battle of Kharkov. In July 1943, after the Third Battle of Kharkov, in which he scored several kills, he took part in Operation Citadel, which was part of the larger offensive on Kursk. Barkmann saw action during the huge tank battles around Prokhorovka. During the offensive, the Wehrmacht's Großdeutschland Panzer Division had been equipped with the brand new Panther Alpha D tanks. However, the combat debut was poor because many of these vehicles suffered mechanical problems before entering combat. After Operation Citadel failed, the division was very quickly transferred to the Meuse River line, where, along with the 3rd SS Panzer Grenadier Division Totenkopf, it was engaged in ferocious defensive battles. In August, Barkmann was transferred to the 4th Company and equipped with Panther Ds, which by now had overcome most of their mechanical problems, their early mechanical problems. As a commander in Das Reich, Barkmann was responsible for the destruction of a large number of enemy tanks, and he was awarded the 2nd class Iron Cross and later the 1st class. Later, the Das Reich division moved to Normandy. In January 1944, they left the Eastern Front and were transferred to France to become part of the larger Panzergruppe West, which was the armoured reserve for the expected Allied invasion of the northern French coast. The division left most of its armour behind for other divisions to use, as it was expected to be equipped with new vehicles when it arrived in France. Das Reich was posted in the Bordeaux region, and apart from a few small skirmishes with partisans, the reposting was fairly uneventful. Barkmann, along with the rest of his battalion, was equipped with the new Panthers, which by this time had been upgraded from Ds into As, which provided a few performance upgrades, a few reliability fixes. Operation Overlord hit the beaches on the 6th of June 1944. In response, the division was released for action by High Command and was placed on high alert and remained in southern France in case of secondary invasions there. When it became clear that the Normandy invasion was the main Allied thrust, the division was ordered north to join the fighting there. On the way to the north, the division was attacked by a large amount of fighter bombers and partisans. The division finally reached the front in early July, and they first fought against the American forces near Saint-Lô. This is where Barkmann famously held off a convoy of Americans. The place where he held with a company of Panzer Grenadiers alone in his Panther has now become known as Barkmann's Corner. Barkmann was in his Panther when a convoy of American vehicles, mixed vehicles, were advancing along the road. But the narrow roads and the impassable hedgerows meant the Germans could establish an extremely deadly defensive line. And Barkmann claims that he inflicted very heavy casualties on the advancing Americans and halted an armoured advance near Le Lorry. Although there are some conflicts with US accounts. But the 4th Cavalry Squadron of the American Armed Forces reported a loss of 2 M5 Stuarts, 2 M8 armoured cars, and 6 general-purpose vehicles. And for these claims, Barkmann was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. After the launch of Operation Cobra, the Das Reich avoided encirclement in the Falaise pocket, where hundreds of thousands of German soldiers were surrounded. And alongside the 9th SS Panzerdivision Hohenstaufen, they fought to hold open an escape route for the trapped German forces. After the collapse of this pocket, the Das Reich division fell back towards the West Wall. During this retreat, Barkmann was involved in many desperate rearguard actions, and once again claimed many destroyed vehicles. Later in 1944, he was promoted to Oberscharführer, which he held until the end of the war, and took part in the Ardennes offensive, known as Operation Wacht am Rhein, or the Battle of the Bulge. He was again seriously wounded on Christmas Day 1944. During the Ardennes offensive, Barkmann's Panther, which was now an Ausf G, drove into a group of American tanks from the US 2nd Armored Division. Barkmann was heavily outnumbered, but he did manage to knock out quite a few Sherman tanks. One Sherman actually rammed Barkmann's Panther, but didn't do a great deal of damage, although both tanks became bogged down and Barkmann stalled, his tank stalled. After a few minutes, Barkmann's mechanic restarted the engine, but the turret's drive was jammed, so they couldn't rotate the turret. Barkmann actually knocked out a pursuing Sherman while he was retreating. I expect they used a manual crank, but his Panther was damaged beyond repair, so he had to be given a new one. Finally, Barkmann ended up fighting against the Soviets again near Stuhlweissenberg in March 1945. He was credited with knocking out 4 T-34s, and this brought the total score of the Das Reich division for the war so far up to 3,000 enemy tanks destroyed. But by this point, Das Reich was exhausted by the non-stop fighting for months on end, and they weren't receiving any replacement tanks, so any tanks they lost were gone. So the number of tanks active was constantly going down and down. By this point, Barkmann's entire unit had only 9 fully operational vehicles, down from maybe 50 or more when they were fully operational. And 3 of these 9 were soon lost to IS-2s. Finally, the remaining 6 Panthers were ordered to link up with the remnants of the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte, commanded by Jochen Peiper. By April, Barkmann was seeing action in the south of Vienna in Austria. Here his Panther was hit by friendly fire, and Barkmann, along with most of his crew, was wounded. Later on, his Panther stumbled into a large bomb crater and was disabled. They couldn't get out, so the crew was forced to destroy the Panther. But Barkmann and his crew continued on foot, and they reached the British front lines, where they were accepted as prisoners of war. Barkmann survived the war, and became the fire chief of his hometown, Kiesdorf. He was also the town's mayor for a time, and he lived there for the rest of his life, dying on the 27th of June 2009. So, that's a summary of Ernst Barkmann and his service in the Second World War. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little historical piece, and I look forward to making more podcasts. Thanks for listening, guys. See you around.